Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1101 for March 23rd, 2025. Coming up in a few minutes.
My sister, who lived in Taiwan, actually gave me a bottle of Kavalan as a present to congratulate me from graduation. She was so happy she didn't think I was going to graduate. I wasn't a very good student back then. However, that's when I learned about Kavalan in the US, actually. I didn't know about it when I was living here. But that represented home.
David Chen is the global brand ambassador for Kavalan, which marks its 20th anniversary of the distillery's construction this year. We'll talk more with David about the history of Kavalan later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
The second release in Dewar's four-part collector series, Dewar's Double Double 38-Year-Old, is now available. It's a tribute to the Scottish Highlands, and it's like nothing you've had before. More in a minute.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. First off, our weekly update on the tariff situation. The European Union has decided to hold off on imposing its 50% tariff on American whiskies until at least April 13th. That's to allow more time for consultation with member states and negotiations with the U.S. French Prime Minister François Bayrou said this week that American whiskey may have been unfairly targeted in the first round of retaliatory tariffs for the Trump administration's tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The Distilled Spirits Council and other industry groups hailed the decision as one that makes common sense, while everyone is waiting to see what the Trump administration will announce on European tariffs April 2nd. In other news, there was an incident at Laphroaig Distillery on Ileachs Wednesday night. I'm calling it an incident because a Suntory Global Spirits spokesperson says there was, quote, no explosion at the distillery, though it sure sounded like one to people living nearby. What's being called a pressure issue with the distillery's boiler resulted in a loud noise and some damage to the steam generation system. My sources on the island tell me the pressure issue blew the door off the boiler room. No one was hurt, and the distillery was closed to visitors on Thursday to allow for a complete assessment of the damage. The visitor center reopened on Friday, and the spokesperson says repairs to the steam generation system should take just a few days. It's not clear whether the incident will affect plans for a second silent season announced earlier this week. Laphroaig will be down for engineering work between April 7th and May 3rd, but the visitor center will remain open for tours during the period. Sotheby's set a record this week for the most valuable bottle of post-Prohibition American whiskey ever sold at auction. A one-of-a-kind Old Rip Van Winkle from the 2007 Kentucky Bourbon Festival Master Distillers Auction sold for $125,000. The previous record was just over $107,000 for a Van Winkle 18-year-old bourbon bottled for Benny's Beverage Depot in Chicago. India's four largest whiskey distillers have joined forces to promote the category through the Indian Malt Whiskey Association. The directors include the leaders of Amrut, Paul John, Radico Khaitan, and Piccadilly Agro Industries. The group is looking to make Made in India a mark of quality whiskey worldwide. There's a dispute in the Scottish Parliament over geographical indication status for English whiskey. MSP Douglas Ross wants the UK government to clarify once and for all whether it will allow a watered-down definition of single malt whiskey for England's distilleries. The proposal currently being considered by government regulators would allow distillers to mash and brew their beer at a different site than their distillery, and Ross says that would be catastrophic for Scotch whiskey. He's citing a letter from the Food Security Minister saying the proposal remains a possibility, despite another minister telling the House of Commons that the definition would not be enacted. Campari CEO Simon Hunt says he's in the mood to offload some brands instead of acquiring new ones, and he accomplished that this week with the sale of Campari's stake in Howler Head Whiskey. Infinium Spirits acquired the banana-flavored bourbon brand for an undisclosed amount. The company counts Templeton Rye as part of its brand portfolio. New whiskies to mention this week. Old Forester has unveiled its first bottled and bond rye whiskey as part of the distillery's experimental 117 series. It's available in limited amounts through the Old Forester website and the distillery's shop in Louisville for $64.99 a bottle. Old Potrero has released its annual bottling, marking the anniversary of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. This year's release is a 13-year-old malted rye with just 431 bottles available at a recommended retail price of $199 a bottle. And speaking of ryes, Stephen Curry's Gentleman's Cut whiskey brand has released its first rye whiskey, celebrating Curry's recent NBA milestone. He became the first player to hit 4,000 three-pointers, and to celebrate, the whiskey carries an exact age statement of 4,000 days, just short of 11 years old. The whiskey is produced at Boone County Distilling in Kentucky and carries a price tag of $333 a bottle. Elijah Craig is releasing a new toasted barrel small batch bourbon in partnership with pro golfer Max Homa. It's an 8-year-old bourbon finished in No. 3 char new oak barrels and is available exclusively in California for $100 a bottle. Barrel Craft Spirits has released the latest edition in its cask finish series. It's a blend of bourbons from Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, finished in PX sherry casks. 9,000 bottles will be available nationwide in the U.S. at $85 a bottle. And Maker's Mark has unveiled the latest release in its wood finishing series. The Keeper's release honors the distillery's warehouse crew that rotates each barrel by hand. It's a follow-up to last year's The Heart release. No word yet on pricing. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. First off, tickets for this year's Kentucky Bourbon Festival will go on sale April 17th. The festival is set for September 5th through the 7th in Bardstown, Kentucky. Diageo plans to put tickets for its Fay Gilles events at Kalila, Lagavulin, and Fort Allen distilleries on sale April 19th. The Fage is scheduled for May 24th through the 31st. The J Hotel in San Francisco will host a St. George Spirits whiskey dinner at its third-floor lounge this Wednesday night. Thursday night is Bourbon's Bistro's 20th anniversary party in Louisville, Kentucky. Whiskey Live London is Friday and Saturday brings us the Newcastle Whiskey Festival in Newcastle, England, and Big Smoke Meets Whiskey Fest in Tampa, Florida. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Dewar's Double Double 38-year-old is the second release in a 4-part limited edition collector series honoring Scotland's most legendary whiskey regions. This rare blended malt, a tribute to the Upper Scottish Highlands, is crafted from nearly 4-decade-old Highland and Islay whiskies. It undergoes Dewar's unique 4-stage aging process with a final finish in Pedro Jimenez sherry casks from the prestigious Royal Brackless Single Malt. The finish invites you to explore your own tasting notes, but for me, there's incredible depth, with rich layers of vanilla, toasted cereals, dried figs, plums, dark chocolate, and a subtle hint of Islay smoke, all beautifully balanced. To truly elevate this tasting experience, renowned chef Gabriel Cruther, in collaboration with Dewar's, has created an exclusive selection of custom chocolates. Crafted from the world's finest ingredients, each piece is infused with a few precious drops of Dewar's Double Double 38-year-old whiskey, making this a luxurious and unforgettable pairing. Now available, this exquisite pairing of whiskey and chocolate promises to deliver an unforgettable experience. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 48.8% alcohol by volume.
This week on WhiskyCast In-Depth, I'm joined by Kavalan Global Brand Ambassador David Chen. The Taiwanese distillery is marking its 20th anniversary this year, along with the 15th anniversary of its flagship Solist range. Here's our conversation. So tell me first of all about the history of Kavalan.
Okay, so Kavalan is actually the first single malt whiskey distillery in Taiwan. And before that, there was a monopoly system controlled by the government, not allowing private distilleries to operate. And that changed until 2002 when Taiwan joined WTO, lifting the ban. So in 2005, the distillery was built. And in 2006, the first new make was distilled. And our first product came out in 2008. Yeah. And a little bit about the word Kavalan. It's actually the historic name of Yilan, where the distillery is located. And we named the brand after Kavalan. We named it after Yilan Kavalan to pay tribute to the land that's given the life and soul to the spirit. So I always like to call it the spirit of Taiwan.
Tell me about the Lee family.
The Lee family. Okay, so the Lee family actually owns King Kwai Group. That's been around for 45 years now. And besides Kavalan, King Kwai Group also has coffee and beer. So Mr. Brown Cafe, Mr. Brown Coffee, and Buckskin Beer. So yeah, King Kwai Group is actually a huge food and beverage company. And Kavalan is like the later brands. But while the other has been around for a longer period of time. Yeah. And actually, so if you notice, a lot of the Kavalan product lines are named after musical elements. Right. That's because, yeah. So for example, the Kavalan Classic, it's not only the classic flavors of Taiwanese whiskey, but also because our founder, Mr. Lee Sr., he's a huge fan of classical music. So he thinks of whiskey making as more than a drink, rather it's art. So other than the Kavalan Classic, there's also the concert master, so like the lead violinist of an orchestra. Also, the Solist series actually represents solo artists, so single cast string. And there's also the podium and the conductor. So the conductor is to pay tribute to the King Kwai Group. So like a conductor, it puts different brands and companies together, while podium is where the conductor stands on. Yeah.
Tell me about Dr. Jim Swan's contributions to Kavalan.
Okay, yeah.
Because I know Kavalan wouldn't exist without him.
For sure. So at first, we didn't have anyone to learn from because we were the first ever whiskey distillery. Ever since the monopoly system was lifted, Mr. Lee Jr. actually took a team with him to Scotland and Japan to learn how to make whiskey. He came back with a vision and built a distillery. However, there was a lot of know-how that was he was still trying to figure out because the climate is so different in Taiwan. So to make whiskey, it wouldn't be the same as to make whiskey in Scotland or Japan or other countries. So Mr. Lee actually invited experts to come to Taiwan and do this with him. While no one accepted the challenge, Dr. Jim Swan was the only one that wanted to, come to Taiwan and then try to experiment the subtropical weather and see how whiskey would turn out if we mature here in Taiwan. So yeah, Dr. Jim Swan started coming over to Taiwan every year when the distillery was just first setting up. And again, like you said, we wouldn't be here today without him, without his help.
What makes the Taiwanese climate so unique for maturing whiskey?
Okay, so back then, when people thought about whiskey in terms of maturation or just whiskey making in general, a lot of people would immediately think Scotch whiskey, so whiskey matured in Scotland. And A lot of the whiskey regions are very cold, or they have like colder climates. For example, Japan, the US, Ireland, etc. However, in Taiwan, it's so hot, so the maturation process will be different. And people always assume that it wouldn't be possible to make something that's like good quality and good flavors because it might be over matured, it might be over oaked. So again, the maturation process is different. How? It's faster here. It's more rapid because in the summer, during the day, it would get up to about almost 40 degrees Celsius. While in the winter, because we receive really cold winds from Siberia, it's very cold and very humid. So with the rapid change of climate conditions, it's actually good oxidation and good extraction. Yeah.
Tell me about the STR casks that Jim created with Kavalan in mind, but all of his clients use them. But Kavalan does more with it than most.
Yes. So what happened was we were buying wine casks from Portugal. So the Vinho Barrique was the solace that had a very strong tie with STR. So Vinho Barrique means wine barrels in Portuguese. The first batch was bought from Portugal. However, the demand was a lot higher than the supply. Therefore, we had to purchase other wine casks. Not only the red wine cask, but also the white wine cask from other parts of the world. However, that presented a problem, being like the flavors would be different, the aromas would be different from each other. So Dr. James Wong worked with Kavalan to come up with the STR technique, which stands for shaving, toasting, recharring. So we shave a little bit of the inside of the cask to remove the unwanted flavors. And then we toast it to release the wooden aromas from the oak. Lastly, we char it again, which is why it gives the spirit such chocolatey, caramel-like flavors and darker colors at the end as a result. Yep.
How did you wind up with Kavalan?
How did I have? That's a very interesting story. So I used to live in the U.S. So when I graduated, when I turned 21, when I was just older, when I was just old enough to drink, my sister who lived in Taiwan actually gave me a bottle of Kavalan as a present to congratulate me from graduation. She was so happy she didn't think I was gonna graduate. I wasn't a very good student back then. However, that's when I learned about Kavalan in the US, actually. I didn't know about it when I was living here. But that represented home. You know, that was something from Taiwan, something that was given from my sister. So, you know, I had a taste and it became a symbol of home. It represented my connection with Taiwan when I was living abroad. And also, when I tasted it, I was so impressed because it was different from other whiskeys I've tried before. You know, it's not peated, it's very fruity, it's so aromatic, and it paired really well with food. Yeah, so till this day, I still have that empty bottle after more than a decade, just to remind me why I do this, why I like Kavalan so much. And yeah, couldn't be happier to be a part of the team.
Where all of you traveled representing Kavalan?
Okay, so let's see. I was originally in charge of the European markets and European markets only, but I've been traveling outside of the European regions as well. So my first project was in Paris to participate in Whisky Live Paris. It was a huge event, you know, a huge show. And I remember on the day I was supposed to return from Paris to Taipei, I got a call from my supervisor saying that we needed help in Hungary. So I changed my flight just hours before I was coming home to go to Budapest to do a whiskey show there. Also, we have branch offices in Germany. So I went there to do some dinner pairing, to pair Kavalan with some authentic Taiwanese food in Germany, and also the U.S. To participate in like award ceremonies. Where else? Japan. There's also Singapore. So yeah, all over the place.
Any interesting stories from your travels?
Oh, a lot actually. So what happens is even though Kavalan is a very well-known brand, there are always questions. There are always people that do not know about the brand. So I always had to tell them a little bit about the history and everything, just like what we're doing. However, I feel like today, since everybody knows a lot about whiskey in general already, if you're a whiskey fanatic, you really had to come up with something different. So during the master classes, it's no longer just telling about Kavalan. It's no longer just the tasting. You have to think outside of the box. You have to be creative. So what happened was I started trying to do my own blending during my master classes. Because if you visited the distillery, you'll find out that there's a cool experience called the DIY blending session where you can, mix your own one and only Kavalan. So I try to copy that and bring the experience to people all over the world. And a lot of people think single malt as in like one, but it's actually single distillery malt whiskey, which means you can blend different spirits from the same distillery and still call it a single malt. So people were surprised how you could do some DIY blending right away and still call it a single malt Kavalan whiskey. So I started doing that. People liked it. People were happy to have their own personalized Kavalan. Sometimes, when they thought the cast strings was a little too much, they could do some water. They could put some ice in it. However they like it. So, it became more like a personal touch. We're starting to build more connections with our fan base rather than for example, back then when we were just telling the stories and then we were talking about the flavors, aromas. So yeah, that's something that I found interesting because everywhere I go, it's not only the stories from us, it's stories from them. Why they like Kavalan, how did they start it, how did they know about Kavalan, and what's so special about it. Because it's not cheap. It's very expensive spirit. So yeah, a lot of the stories, a lot of people I got to meet. I think those were really, really cool moments for me.
The last time I visited Kavalan several years ago, you'd just opened the second distillery.
Okay.
How has it expanded since then? Because I know there were plans for a third.
Yeah, so the third maturation warehouse actually just opened. So the third maturation warehouse is bigger than the first and second maturation warehouse combined. It just tells you a little bit about our plans for expansion. And we have been experimenting with different casks, trying to come up with different products. So yeah, that's very exciting for us.
And you're still pulling in almost 1 million people a year to the distillery, right?
Yes, exactly. And even more people now because the pandemic is over. Yeah. You should come again.
I've visited Kavalan twice over the years, and you can get a look at the distillery in our WhiskyCast HD videos from Taiwan. You'll find them at our YouTube channel, and that's WhiskyCast In-Depth. Let's start the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the new Bulleit Bottled in Bond Bourbon. This one was distilled at the Bulleit Distilling Company distillery in Shelbyville, Kentucky, back in 2017, and of course it's bottled at 50% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel, tobacco leaf, soft spices, honey, vanilla, and cocoa. The taste has notes of cocoa, cinnamon, black pepper, red apples, honey, and vanilla. The finish is long and peppery with a hint of red apples, and I'm scoring the Bulleit Bottled in Bond Bourbon a 92. Next up, the Paul John Nirvana Single Malt from India. This one is bottled at 46% ABV, and the nose has touches of barley sugar, sandalwood, lemon zest, garden herbs, and honey. The taste has a nice balance of lemon zest, white pepper, barley sugar, and honey, and the finish is long and citrusy tart. I'm scoring the Paul John Nirvana a 92. Finally, let's look at the latest Bernheim barrel-proof wheat whiskey from Heaven Hill. Batch A225 is bottled at 62.7% ABV, and the nose has soft spices, a hint of oak, honey, vanilla, and black tea. The taste is dry and astringent with notes of black pepper, oak tannins, black tea, and honey. The finish is long and woody, and I'm scoring the Bernheim barrel-proof Batch A225 a 93. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,900 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com. Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and see what people are talking about this week. Lots of photo sharing from distillery visits this week, along with St. Patrick's Day drams. Tor Christensen from Bifrost Spirits in Norway sent along a photo with this caption: "That feeling, first being happy about receiving a container of barrels, and then the trailer gets stuck in the snow. Arctic conditions are just unpredictable." Bifrost is the northernmost distillery in the world, located just above the Arctic Circle. Ian Bruce shared a photo of his TV set with the latest film from the creators of the Water of Life movie. Independent Spirits is a 4-part look at the independent bottlers from around the world that just premiered at the Independent Spirits Festival in Scotland. We'll include a link for more details on how you can stream it in the show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. R is heading back to Bardstown soon and has a recommendation for first-time Bourbon Trail visitors. Besides hitting a couple of distilleries, I'll definitely stop by the Oscar Getz Museum. I highly recommend it to anyone interested in bourbon history. Thanks to everyone who shared their photos with us in the app this week. If you'd like to join the conversation, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and jump right in. You can also find us on social media. We're on X, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Peter Sprunger posted this question in the app this week: does anyone have a good, semi-scientific reason why one whiskey is more warming than another whiskey? It came up when we were drinking 2 drams of about the same ABV. One was nice and warming, the other was hot. Well, there are many reasons why, but the most critical factor is the viscosity of the whiskey, along with the level of oak tannins on the palate. A dry and astringent whiskey, like the Bernheim Barrel Proof that I shared my tasting notes for a couple of minutes ago, can feel hotter as it dries out the inside of your mouth. That's when comparing 2 whiskeys of the same ABV level. Higher ABV whiskeys will naturally have a stronger burn or heat sensation because of the higher alcohol content. It can also depend on your own individual sensitivity to alcohol as well. There could be factors in the distilling process for different types of whiskeys as well. I am still researching this, and we'll have more on an upcoming episode. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at WhiskyCast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store, or find us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double Double 38-year-old blended malt has arrived, and it's a true gem for collectors. Secure a bottle, and you'll be adding a rare piece of history to your collection.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2025, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.